I'd love to hear first off your reaction to what you heard today, because we spoke to you back at the end of January. You said that, perhaps there's been some missteps along the way when it comes to execution in making Siri a bigger part of your life. You fast forward to where we are in early June. Do you think that this update goes far enough?
Yeah, I think it's a great first step in sort of the Siri renaissance. So there's a lot there. It's hard for people to comprehend on such a quick presentation everything that this use of context brings, visual intelligence, and the fact that it's very likely going to work very well. And that's a difficult thing to convince people of with such a short thing. But I think once they start using it, I think you'll see the power of what Apple brings and what context brings.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that, what you heard today that you're most optimistic about. And, you mentioned the power that Apple brings in the tool that they have in Siri, the potential avenues there. I mean, what do you think that Apple brings that can help differentiate Siri for what I'm sure are going to be a lot of competitors coming on the scene?
Well, the thing that they focused on, which I totally agree with, that consumers are going to care about, is the privacy, the security of knowing that you have an assistant that can know everything about you and is in a very secure, starting space. And then once you have that data, that context allows you to do a lot of things that are uniquely Apple. So, the fact that it knows about your relationships, it's got, real-time health data. So Siri can turn into your, health advisor, your fitness instructor. There's a lot of use cases in there that haven't fully been grokked by the wider sort of population here that are going to matter a lot.
I am curious, though, Doug, about just kind of the overall utility of this, and they really seem to want to highlight this idea that this isn't kind of the plaything or the toy, that this is sort of the true assistant in your pocket, if you will. But there are a lot of us already using either third-party apps or even using Claude or something like that itself to do a lot of the things that they showed off today. So I do wonder just about the competitive landscape that they're sort of trying to push this into relative to what was basically no competitive landscape, more or less, 10 years or so ago when this thing came out.
So I think you'll have a lot of people trying to compare the two, but I think once you start using it, you'll recognize the difference pretty quickly. GPT or Claude doesn't know what the intensity of your workout was, how well you slept last night, the relationships that you have across, different avenues of your life. Once you combine all of those things, that unlocks a lot of things that I think aren't, naturally obvious to, on first blush. So, yes, you can always open up ChatGPT the way you always have been, but I think Siri's going to take a large percentage of the share of how people use it today as consumers.
With regards to the actual usage and more importantly, the idea of what the potential cost can be, they talked a lot about, first, of course, obviously relying on private cloud servers or private cloud compute, I think was the language that they used. But they also said, look, there'll probably be some sort of a data cap, if you will, which I assume you can probably buy out of. But it gets to this idea of the utility relative to the cost. Do you think they're going to find a way to, I guess, strike that balance for the consumer?
Yeah, I think 80 to 90% of every query that you're going to use as a consumer, you'll be able to run on an on-device model, which means you have essentially a data center in your pocket with free tokens. So, yeah, I think that's going to be pretty disruptive to, any frontier company who wants to charge, for large data centers when essentially you've got a billion data centers running around in people's pockets.
Are the current chips and more importantly also the battery that we have in these devices, are they going to be capable of handling that additional load?
Yeah, I just read an article about how they've almost gotten to the point with the existing chips that are shipping now where they can run the entire thing locally. So that's literally zero token cost. And, things only get better from here.
And Dag, I want to go back to what you were saying about, some of these frontier models. When you think about a world where, maybe there's more interconnectivity between all these apps, you don't have so many individual islands that, you could imagine a world where this sort of threatens that frontier consumer business model. Talk to us a little bit more about that and, over what potential timeline you could see that playing out, because certainly that's a different world than the one that we're currently living in when it comes to consumer AI.
Yeah, so I believe that is Apple's secret weapon here, is that today apps are islands, right? They're islands of functionality. You open each one, but they don't work together. And Apple has an opportunity to use the power of the largest app store in the world and the entire economy that creates to actually build bridges between those apps, allow people to do much more complex and much more useful queries that combine applications. And I think I sent you an example of that. I can give you a few if you'd like, but I think using the power of the App Store is sort of the next chapter that can propel Apple forward and really give them an advantage over others.
So, I mean, just real quickly, we only have about a minute left, but when we talk about some of the examples here, sort of give me an idea sort of a way just a normal person, meaning like a techie person, would get the most value out of this.
Well, out of the ones released today or the future I'm describing?
The future you're describing.
So, for example, planning a night out, you have to use about 4 different apps specifically to do that. Call an Uber, find a restaurant, check the traffic to see how long you need to leave before the appointment. I think you can ask that in one query in the future. All of these things work together and just make it far more simple to get things done. And I think that's always been the goal of Siri. And actually, we called it back in the day a do engine instead of a search engine for that very reason.